Hi everybody, this is Jamie from the Unlikely Homeschool, and today I thought I'd share with you a peek into my annual portfolio that I make for my kids. I do this at the end of every school year as a way to compile all the work that we've done or they've done throughout the year. I do not keep every single worksheet and every single paper they do because, quite frankly, I have 4 learners right now, soon to be 5, and my basement would be flooded with workbooks and worksheets, and I just don't have the space, nor do I think it's necessary to save every single piece of work that they do. I am not legally required by my state to put together a portfolio, but I do it for several different reasons. I have listed out all of those reasons and actually written a 2-part series on annual portfolios that I will link to within this post. So if you'd like to know the reasons why somebody who's not required to make a portfolio would choose to do so, please refer to that post, as well as there's some helpful lists that you can consider as you're making your own portfolio. If you happen to live in a state that requires you to make a portfolio, I would suggest that you go to your state association website or perhaps HSLDA and find out what is legally required for you and what you should include and make sure that you have within a portfolio. So here's an example of this year's 2014-2015 portfolio. I just put the finishing touches on it today, and so I thought I'd give you a peek into it. I always make my portfolios with 3-ring binders. I just think they stack really nicely in Tupperware tubs in my basement. I choose white because I color code my kids during school, and so they each have a color that they're designated to, and so it was really hard to come up with another color. So white is just by default the color that I choose for our portfolios. I don't have yet on this one, but usually I will put a little piece of, or a little label, a plastic label, a sticky label on the side, the spine of the folder, and that is where I write the year of that particular binder, as well as the first initial and the school grade of each of my kids down the side of the binder. This binder is a group binder. I don't make individual portfolios for each of my kids. I actually used to, but I just found that the more learners that I had coming down the pike, I was just collecting sort of the same information about all of them. We do so much of our learning together that it just seemed kind of redundant to constantly regurgitate the same information for different binders. And I figure if there comes a day where I have to separate the information out, maybe for college admittance or entrance, I can always Xerox or copy the information from the binder and create individual ones. But for right now, one binder works sufficiently. So I'm just going to open it up and kind of give you a peek of what I put in my binder. This is just the things that I choose to save for my children, and you're probably going to have other things that you think are more important. So I'm just giving you a peek to give you some ideas, and then I want you to take this information, and should you choose to make a binder for yourself or a portfolio, just use this as an example. This isn't a dogma. This isn't the only way you have to do it. The very first sheet of my binder I actually have upside down because it has some personal information on it, but it's our letter of intent to homeschool. I'm legally required to submit one of those to my state, so I always make a copy of it, and I include it right away, first page of the binder. Then you'll see that I have little tabs along the side. The first tab says group, and so everything that is in this particular section is the bibliography and sort of records of any group learning that we've done. I have a plastic sleeve inserted, and inside that plastic sleeve are pamphlets and tickets and handouts from different field trips that we've taken. And I shove them all in the plastic sleeve because it gives me a great user-friendly record of the field trips that we've taken, as well as the contact information for those field trips. Should I ever choose to go on that similar field trip again in a few years, I have all that information here. So then I flip it over and you'll see that I have a group bibliography page. It says group bibliography and then the school year. And then each individual subject that we do together as a family is listed, as well as the resources that we used, whether it's individual books or maybe a curriculum. I have the name and the author of that resource listed. And this is something that I type at the end of the school year, but because I've been doing this since the very beginning, since my daughter was, I think, in preschool, I kind of keep to the same format. And so I have this formatted in a Word document on my computer and just sort of change out the information from year by year. So it's a lot easier than perhaps it looks, because so much of it is done for me from the previous year. This creating a group bibliography is great because it not only shows what you did, but should you ever choose to go back and revisit some of those books, maybe in a few years when some of your younger kids are now older, and you want to rehash some of the things that you've previously learned with them, you know right away what resources to look for, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already written down for you. The very next page is, let's see, it's sticking together, is the scope and sequence, or the calendar for our co-op, just listing the things that we did. Because I taught a class for co-op this year, I also have included my lesson plans for that particular class. Obviously, I didn't teach every class, so I can't include that, but at least I can show what they learned in that particular class. A lot of the next few pages are bibliography for specific subjects. Because I don't choose a pre-packaged history or science curriculum, I kind of have to keep a running list myself of all the resources and books that we read and watch together. And so we learned Roman history this year for history, and so this is just a couple of pages of all the different books that we read as a group with the title and the author to sort of prove what Roman history actually entailed for us. It also is a great record for me for if I need to revisit Roman history ever again, I'll know exactly what resources to go to, and I don't have to try to come up with those off the top of my head. This particular list I keep as a running list throughout the year, because I can't expect myself to be able to regurgitate or recall all of these books at the end of the school year. So on my computer at the beginning of the year, I'll make a Word document with whatever history we're studying and the year, and then as we finish a book, I'll just type it down at the end of the school day quickly and then save it. And so throughout the year, I'm just typing 1 or 2 books or 1 or 2 resources a day. And then by the end of the year, it's just ready to print out. And that goes the same with our science curriculum. We sort of put together our own science units, or I do, and so I just have the bibliography information there. We do a summer study, and so I complete that at the end of summer. So this would have been the summer things that we did last year, because our school year ended at the beginning of summer. We did this summer weather unit, and I included that in the 2014-2015 school year. Right after that is a list of the read alouds that we did, and again, I create this as a running list that I just continue to add to throughout the year. There's a field trip list, and obviously I kept all the pamphlets and the tickets from different field trips. Some of them didn't have pamphlets and tickets, like if we visited a farm, Mr. Joe Farmer doesn't necessarily have a pamphlet to hand me. So I write the date and then where we visited, and if there was something in particular of interest that we did on that field trip that maybe just the name of the place doesn't really describe what it would be about, I also include that. So we went to Albuquerque, New Mexico over the Christmas holidays, and we visited the petroglyphs. Well, if you don't know what those are, I have included those. Ancient writings, drawings on mountains and rocks. So I can just revisit that quickly and see all of what we did throughout the year for field trips. The next few pages in my group section are Xerox copies of the table of contents of certain books that we did together. And most of these are what I would consider spine or encyclopedic type books that have a lot of different topics in them. So if you happen to live in a state that requires you to keep a portfolio, you might include in your bibliography that you use the Usborne's Encyclopedia of Ancient World. But then as you're submitting that to your state, they might look at you and think, well, what does that mean? What did you actually study? What does that book entail? So by Xeroxing the table of contents of that book, they can actually see, somebody could actually see the different units that were involved in that book and the different topics that you read about. So I Xeroxed the table of contents and then put a little bit of bibliography information at the top to know what book it came from and the publisher and the year, because the table of contents page usually doesn't show that. Then occasionally we come upon a book that we don't use the entire thing. We just maybe read a couple of sections from that book or a couple of units. And so if that is the case, when I Xerox the table of contents page, I highlight with a highlighter just the sections that we actually completed. And then the next section in my portfolio begins the individual group work. And so each of my kids, or each of the kids that are currently in school, have a tab, and the tabs will say their name and the grade. And typically I like to color code the tabs because I color code my kids and I can easily look and see whose tab that is. But you can just write the name and the grade. Most of the learning that takes place in my home is done together as a group, but there are obviously some individual subjects. Each of my kids have to do their own language and their own math, and they have their own particular interests, and perhaps they do individual projects. And so I have a section for each of their individual work within our binder. So this is my daughter's, and the first sheet that she has is her individual bibliography. So it'll say her name and the grade that she's in and the year, and then it'll have individualized subjects as well as the resources that we used for that. And this is in addition to the group bibliography that I had shown you before. Next is her own history bibliography. She reads all the history books that we read together, but because she's in junior high, she obviously needs a little bit higher level learning, and so I assigned her to some more meatier, weightier books that she had to complete each semester, and they're listed here. Then I have her book log, and she keeps this as a record herself on the computer as a running record throughout the year, and she's responsible to type it all out, and then at the end of the year I print it out. She does some independent projects throughout the year, and I have information about that listed on my blog, so if you're at all interested as to how to get started with independent projects or what they look like, you can certainly check out that link. I'll try to remember to include it. But within this independent project page, I typically just write a general date of when she did it. She used to do a different project every month, and now as she's gotten a little bit older, she likes to dive into a topic a little bit more extensively, so oftentimes it takes much longer than a month. But I try to put down a general date, the topic, some of the research items that she used, maybe resources or videos she watched, and then the presentation section is just a brief synopsis of how she presented her information to an audience, whether it's her family or some friends or whatever. At the end of each of her independent projects, she has to present the information she learned in some form or another. So this is just a brief synopsis of the projects that she did. After that comes her table of contents pages for different resources that she used individually, and I follow that same pattern as you saw before. And then just past those table of contents, I have some samples of individual work. Now, like I said at the beginning, I don't save every single worksheet, every single workbook, but I do save some samples of the work so that you can see a clear progression throughout the year and to show that yes, she did in fact do the work. So usually with a workbook-based curriculum, what I'll do is I'll take the very first chapter review, the middle chapter review, and the last chapter review. Or if you do tests, you can do a sampling of a handful of the different tests. You wouldn't want to pull out all the very first ones or all the very last ones. You want a nice sampling to show a progression. And so within each subject that she actually had a workbook or a worksheet, I have samples. Now we do teaching textbooks, and so I'm actually able to print out her scores and include those. Apart from that, I don't do a whole lot of scoring in my homeschool. And then the next sections look exactly the same, only they're for my other children. Now this is my third grader, and I had the luxury with him of being able to go back to my original document for my daughter who had completed third grade, I think about 4 years ago. And so I was able to see some of the resources that she used, and so many of them were the same. And so when I created his bibliography, I actually just copied and pasted hers and then just tweaked it by inserting his name and the year, and then he used a few different resources, and I just tweaked it. But it made it a whole lot easier by just copying and pasting from some of the old documents I had created years earlier. The only other thing I want to show you is for certain kids, I do have another plastic sleeve in their individual section. Should they have a project, an art project perhaps, or something they entered in the county fair, or this is actually my son's kindergarten graduation certificate, something that I don't want to 3-ring punch and ruin it, I put it in a plastic sleeve and insert it there. I will actually have many more of those in the portfolio by the end of summer, but right now I have some of their art pieces and some of their projects set aside to enter into the county fair at the end of summer, so I haven't yet put them in here yet, but they will be included. So each section will have a plastic sleeve for some of those specialty projects. That's just a quick glimpse of how I currently do my portfolio. I generally tweak it just a little bit every year because I get a little bit more efficient, or maybe life just demands it, but that is a quick glimpse of all that my annual portfolio entails. Yours will obviously look a little bit different, and that's just fine. Thanks for joining me. Happy homeschooling.